Imagine standing on a battlefield in the 18th century, surrounded by muskets, cannons, and thick clouds of smoke. The crack of gunfire is deafening, but what sends a shiver down every soldier's spine isn't the bullet whizzing past. It's the unmistakable sight of a powder keg. That seemingly ordinary wooden barrel packed with gunpowder had the potential to turn a weaponized conflict into a full-scale catastrophe. Today, we're diving deep into the forgotten terror of the battlefield. Not the musket, not the cannon, but the powder keg, right here on History of Simple Things. To understand the fear surrounding powder kegs, we need to go back to the very beginnings of gunpowder warfare. Gunpowder, or black powder, was invented in China during the 9th century and made its way to Europe by the 13th century. Its introduction revolutionized warfare, giving rise to cannons, firearms, and explosives. But as armies began relying on this volatile substance, they quickly learned how unpredictable and dangerous it could be, not only in the hands of the enemy, but within their own ranks. The powder keg, a barrel used to transport and store gunpowder, became both a necessity and a liability. It was a literal ticking time bomb. Unlike guns, which had a relatively controlled and directional function, powder kegs were indiscriminate in their destruction. A musket ball might strike one man, but a single spark near a powder keg could kill dozens. These barrels, often made of wood and sealed with iron hoops, were packed to the brim with finely ground black powder, a substance sensitive to heat, friction, and static electricity. In battle, where chaos, fire, and explosions were everywhere, having barrels of powder nearby was like walking around with a live grenade in your arms. Even something as simple as a hot metal tool, a dropped lantern, or an errant ember from a campfire could set off a devastating chain reaction. The fear of powder kegs wasn't limited to land. Naval warfare elevated that fear to terrifying new levels. Wooden ships in the age of sail carried hundreds of pounds of gunpowder below deck to feed their cannons. These storage rooms, known as powder magazines, were heavily guarded, insulated, and protected from open flame at all costs. Sailors weren't even allowed to wear shoes with metal soles inside them to prevent sparks. If an enemy cannonball struck the magazine, or if a fire broke out, the entire ship could, and often did, explode. There are countless historical accounts of ships vanishing in seconds due to powder magazine detonations. Guns could sink a ship in an hour. A powder keg could obliterate it in a heartbeat. History has more than a few examples of powder keg accidents turning battles and entire wars on their heads. Take the Siege of Breda, for example. A single explosion from a powder magazine devastated the defending forces, allowing the besieging Spanish troops to take the city. Or the infamous HMS Queen Charlotte, a British warship that caught fire while anchored. The fire reached the powder magazine, resulting in a catastrophic explosion that killed over many people in an instant. These weren't acts of war, they were accidents, and that's what made powder kegs so terrifying. Guns required intent. Powder kegs could betray you with a flicker of bad luck. Beyond their destructive potential, powder kegs also had a psychological effect on soldiers. Knowing that your own weapons could turn against you added a layer of constant, creeping anxiety. Soldiers tasked with transporting or guarding powder had to move with extreme caution. The pressure of handling something that could erupt at any second was a mental burden that guns simply didn't carry. In fact, during long marches or in the heat of battle, commanders often assigned their most trusted men to powder transport duties, not because they were brave, but because they were calm. In some armies, powder bearers were required to abstain from alcohol and remain isolated from the rest of the troops. One careless act could doom an entire battalion. Powder kegs were also prime targets for sabotage. An infiltrator didn't need to fight on the front lines. They just had to sneak into a powder magazine with a flint, and they could end a battle before it began. Armies knew this, which is why powder storage areas were heavily guarded. During the Gunpowder Plot of 1605 in England, conspirators planned to blow up the House of Lords using barrels of gunpowder hidden in a cellar. The plot was famously foiled, but the message was clear. Powder kegs weren't just battlefield risks. They were political weapons, tools of revolution and terrorism. Their mere presence was enough to change security policies and redefine the meaning of internal threat. As military technology advanced, the way gunpowder was stored and used evolved. Cartridge-based ammunition reduced the need for open powder handling, and metal containers began to replace wooden barrels. The invention of smokeless powder in the late 19th century, which was more stable and less sensitive than traditional black powder, further reduced the risk of catastrophic accidents. By World War I, powder kegs as they were originally known had become largely obsolete, replaced by safer, more efficient systems. But for centuries before that, they haunted the minds of soldiers and commanders alike. In the end, what made powder kegs so feared was their unpredictability. Guns were tools of precision and intention. Powder kegs were chaos incarnate, indifferent to friend or foe. They symbolized the fragile line between control and catastrophe, a reminder that even the most powerful weapons could become liabilities. In every major conflict from the Renaissance to the Napoleonic Wars, soldiers lived with the grim knowledge that a single spark could undo everything. So the next time you read about historical battles and see those wooden barrels in the background, remember, they weren't just supplies. They were silent threats, more terrifying than any weapon in hand. Powder kegs weren't feared because they killed more. They were feared because they could kill everyone all at once. They didn't just shape the course of battles, they shaped the fear behind every command. In a world built on strategy and control, powder kegs were the wild card that no one could tame. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.